I have proven to myself that magic is real. Let me grab something. So I have these things. I have tarot cards. So one of the things that I study at universities is, and I say universities because I've been to three, so and I still don't have a degree, but I'm working on that. And I minor in religious studies, and so I study different religions. And I always find paganism a very interesting one, um, which isn't really a religion in itself because depending on what kind of where you're at in culture or wherever you're living at determines what I guess type of pagan you are. So if you're a pagan in like Italy, I guess normally you would be talking about Greek gods or Roman gods, and then if you're in Norway, you would be talking about like Viking gods. So I think if Norway is a part of that, not sure. Um, so don't quote me on that, or say Ireland. Then I guess like if that, yeah, obviously if you're a pagan in Ireland, you'd be like a Celtic usually, and worship Celtic gods. So pagans are an interesting thing, and so is Wicca, and which Wicca is actually more so of a term of enlightenment and not actual spell casting, which is apparently a big misconception because you could be a sage, for instance, back in the old times, and that did not mean that you practiced magic. That meant like you had herbal remedies and such of that nature. And then you could predict the weather because you had common sense enough to know that a gray cloud coming and you could perceive like, oh, that cloud's going to be here in about 2 days. And then you just knew when it was going to rain and you would say, hey, now would be a good time to plant something that needs rain immediately. And that's what, and then people would come to you and you were a sage because you just weren't dumb. I guess I don't, or someone told you how to predict the weather and look at cloud movement. One, whatever way you want to describe it. So, but if you are in any religion like any Abrahamic faith sort of thing, because one of the craziest things that I always saw growing up as going to churches for Christianity is most people that go to church, they don't even believe in that. Like they sit here and like they listen to this story of Jesus rising from the grave and they shout amen and talk about all this stuff, but then whenever they watch a movie like Harry Potter or something, they're like, oh, that's all fictional. I mean, we spell there's a spelling of magic with a K at the end to distinguish like from shooting fireballs out of your fingertips, because that's not actually what magic is. So apparently, in which I don't know the guy's name, but he's one of those crazy scientists you see on the History Channel with some wild hair, kind of looks Asian, and he says that with quantum physics, and he's a scientist, a quantum physicist, and he says that you can see energy before it's there. So in essence, like if you have like a pencil, the pencil is on the other side of the wall according to some type of energy scans. And what's interesting about that is that there is that there is more than one type of waves. So when you have like radio waves, or yeah, so that's like microwaves, radio waves, and then there's other waves. There's more than just two or three. Apparently, there's a lot, and some of those are thought waves. So if you think about it, it makes sense, because if you're talking to somebody and you say they make you feel uncomfortable, what do you mean by that? So it's like you can set the mood in a room. And we know that. And we know that psychologically as well, because if someone comes in, like, I don't know how to explain this. If someone comes into your house and you're talking to them and they have a certain tone about them, or they do something with their eyes or something with their hand movements that seems off-putting to you, there's something in their mind that is affecting you, because their mind goes into their actions. And we know that because of substance dualism, which was a thing put forth by Plato. You don't know what's going on in my head, but you see the actions of it that come out. Because the mind and body are for two different purposes. So, also to that, if you get really close to someone and you lie to them and they can tell that you're lying, how do you explain that? Like if I say something and I just say it in a complete normal tone, you ask me a question, I just say no, and I can pass a lie detector test. If you know me really well, there's people that are so closely connected that they can tell, like, I know you just lied to me. And I've been in those situations. And it's really, really wild. Because I know how to lie to somebody. Not a lot. And because, like, with the stuff that I study, like, you kind of, like, can understand how to do that, and that there's certain things that you can't do. So, for instance, like, apparently, so eye contact is one thing people always say with lies. But for me, I don't look people in the eyes anyways. And that's for a whole nother issue. So people can't use that for me. And I know that. So if I was to tell a lie, I always get out of the eye thing. And so when you find stuff like that, but then someone can still tell when you're lying, not just based, and it's not even based off your actions, it is solely based off of the mind, that they could sit there and call out. And they call it intuition. But intuition, there's an aurora in the room that people describe. And so, like, you know, if somebody comes in and I could come in, it's like this, I could come in and say the exact same thing as somebody who's coming in to murder you. Like, we could both say the same stuff, but only one person would make you feel uncomfortable. Hopefully it's the murderer that makes you feel uncomfortable. But essentially, he could say the same thing that I say to you, and then that could be end up, the other person could be your murderer. So, and if you catch that with an intuition wise, you're like, okay, they both just said the same thing to me in the exact same tone. Doesn't matter what it is, if it was threatening or not. Like, it's just like, would you fall? And it's kind of like one of those Ted Bundy things. Like, would you fall for the murderer if he was just, you know, like, trying to date you or something? And so a lot of, like, there was one girl that said with Ted Bundy that he didn't do anything wrong and the date was good, but she just felt really uncomfortable about him. And so she, like, had called her brother and went home or something, and she was like the only one that survived. And he ran across, or he was across the road that night or something, she said, and they called the cops and everything, and that was like the only girl that he like dated supposedly that he didn't kill. So how was she able to know that when she herself said he didn't do anything wrong? There wasn't nothing physically that he did. There was nothing that he said. It was just something just seemed wrong. And I think that is a spiritual type capacity that most people can't reach. And I guess that's what you would call enlightenment, so to speak. Because, and a lot of times, speaking of that, a lot of times people don't really know what they want. And that's because, like, because like a lot of times be like, well, they'll go to therapists and I'll say, I just don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I'm just not happy. And they could be married with 5 kids and have millions of dollars. And then they still say that because, and I think they say that because I think with emotions, I think everybody reacts to things around them and they get their wills they get other people's wills inserted on them. Because any kind of communication is manipulation. So, if I want to go out to eat with somebody and I ask them, hey, do you want to go out to eat with them? I've now triggered in their head 2 options from my verbal communication. So I have now influenced them to reply yes or no to me, or to at least consider acknowledging me and replying yes or no. So I have inserted my will now onto them. So if I reply, they have manipulated me into speaking. If I ignore them, if somebody just came up to me and asked me to go out to eat with them, and I just ignore them, their will has never been inserted on me. But if they come, actually, no, I take that back, because I still have the thought process of it. The only way that I could not have their will inserted on me is if I did not hear them, if I was deaf and had my head turned. But even in then, you would still be presential. Some people are still aware enough to know that there's somebody behind them, either looking at them or acknowledging them or thinking on them. So really, the world is constantly acting upon you. So when you base things off of your emotions, you're like, well, I feel this, I feel that. So I want to go do this because this is how I feel, and I want to go do this because this is how I feel. You are setting yourself up for failure, I always feel like, because you should always, I think, emotions matter. Obviously, you don't do something that is like just demoralizing yourself constantly. That's not good. But you can't just always go and say, let me make the options that just make me feel good all the time, because they're not always the best options for you in the longevity of life. And I guess, like, I don't think most people understand that. And from just my own personal experience, because I feel like most people react to other things, because it's kind of like, how people always talk about like breaking the cycles of abuse and stuff. So that means that other people are reacting from what they saw their parents do. So they're not ever like doing what they actually want to do. They're doing actions that they feel are the correct actions because of something else that happened to them. So it's like if somebody punched me in the face and I feel like I want to punch him in the face back, and I punch them in the face back. I punched him in the face because he punched me in the face. That's a reaction. And if he punched me in the face because I yelled at him, that's a reaction. So I always say, stop reacting and start acting, because I shouldn't make a decision to do something simply because of something you did or said to me. But to the case of how that applies in magic is, had the most intriguing thought, I thought. Uh, I had to write it down. So if the idea, okay, so like blood rituals and like binding rituals and stuff is kind of what I thought on this. So if the idea of a blood ritual being binding psychs you into letting it bind you to the person, so like you think like to yourself, you're like, oh, I just did a blood ritual with this person. Am I really bound to them? And you break up with them and you leave, and you think about that blood ritual that you once did, and then you're like, huh, are we bound? And then it psychs you into thinking, oh, wow, I think about him here. Well, I went on this date and I thought about something he did. So am I bound to him? And you start doing stuff like that to yourself, psyching you into thinking that you're actually bound. Because of the experience and stigma placed on it. So like in culture, we've said, oh, blood rituals bind you, and we make all these fantasy books and games about, and movies about stuff like that. So if the experience of stigma psychs you into thinking it, then doesn't that in turn mean a blood ritual actually binds you? Meaning it is truly magic with K, to distinguish it from magic with like shooting fireballs out of your fingertips, which isn't very real. You can use science to do that, but not just on your own accord. So I call it more, I would just call it practical magic, is kind of what I call it. So if that's the case, and in the case with the quantum reasoning that I tried to explain probably very piss poorly, then isn't that an indicator then, if energy is already there before it has moved to its destination, then doesn't that mean divination is a real thing when you're doing the tarot cards? Because it's like I've done tarot cards with people before, and they've are really kind of crazy accurate with what card. Like I pulled a card that said dude was in court, that he was like, I'm gonna have legal issues as he was starting his divorce, and it was in the spot that was a current situation or current problem. So one of the decks that did, you put the first card down and the other card over it, and the card that's over it is like your current problem that you're facing, and it said legal issues, and there would be a judge involved, and yeah, he had just started a divorce with his wife that had only told one person in there, and then he like had to go. I almost got the guy in trouble because he was like, he texted me that day. He was like, so he pulled me outside and he asked if I had talked about about his divorce, and he didn't believe me that I'd never told you. And so I had to go and I had to tell him. I was like, no, like he did not tell me that. Like that card just got pulled, man. I was like, I didn't know. Don't think he like ratted you out and like started talking about your business behind your back, everything, because he didn't. So yeah, it was. That's why I think that's my reasoning on why I think magic is real then, because that's like it's the stuff that just your mind does, and that is what I mean. I think that's what we call a soul, for instance. So I was talking about the physical repetition of action. That's the body, but the mind is an interesting place to be, but it also shows that like you can just stare at somebody and have a mental conversation with them. And I think that's a thing of higher consciousness. And then people like will take, I've never taken shrooms. I swear to God, I would never put a fungus in my body. Does not sound like a good idea. But people that do, who always talk about it, they always talk about the hallucinations and everything. So if your mind can create all of this, then your mind can create its own reality, and your mind can connect with other people to the point of where like you don't even have to say anything or do anything, and they can have the same thought as you. So for instance, like I was playing a song one time, and this girl that I was dating uh, was listening to it with me, and we both pulled up on YouTube to change for the next song. And she said, "Well, you could play your song first." And then I played mine, and she was like, "Oh, well, this was the song I was going to play." So we both went down the same thought process. We both heard a song, and we both had said to each other like, "Hey, it's making me think of another song." And she said that too. And we both looked up a song, and she said, "Play yours first." And then play mine, and it was the same one as hers. So people can have mental conversations with each other, and then that is also magic. And one of the things that I always say, it's like the Bible will say that you're made in the image of God, and I think people will misinterpret that. So I think because everybody, from what I've heard, everybody that I know who's like said that to me, they always say like, "Oh, okay, so God's a human being." Like they think that God has hair, has hands and feet, and he's shaped the same like us and looks like a human. Uh, I don't think that's the case, because I think when it says that you're in the image of God, it means that your mind creates like God does. So it says, "In the beginning there was the Word." So when you have a thought, say I have an industry. Let's say you have an industry that you want to build in your head that sells cars. You've thought about it. You've thought about how you're going to do it and everything. Now you speak the word out and you say, "Okay, hey, I'm going to start this auto business," and you start selling to people and you go get the loans and everything. You're now creating something that was thought of in your head. And say you were the first person to do it. You're the first person to make a car, the first person to even visualize what a car was, and you create it. That is your image of God. Uh, the ability to perceive something in your head and then speak it into creation or make it into creation. That is what it means when it says we are in the image of God. God is not a human being. God is a personal being, just as our minds are personal beings. And the mind is more than just neurons going off. Because when you look at things, there's a thing in philosophy called the Mary's Room experiment that I recently learned about. So if you were living in a black and white, if you were living in a black and white room, and you were learning about perception of colors, the psychology of colors, and you were studying brain scans on, like, if a person sees yellow, like it goes off over here. If they see red, it goes off over here. And you study all of that and you know everything about it. Expert on the subject. Anybody has anything question wise about the knowledge of colors, you're the go-to person for the world. Now, you've never seen color though. You step out of this black and white room and you see the color yellow on a flower for the first time, and you feel now you feel and you think of actually seeing the color. Now have you learned new information? And I think that is what we call experiential knowledge. I don't know if that's a real word or not. It's just something I've heard and have used myself and heard other people use. And I do think that is knowledge in itself, because it's like this. If I say, think of a giraffe, and I think of a giraffe, and the other person thinks of a giraffe, we're not thinking about the same giraffe. So individuals have different thought processes to get to the actual physical substance that we're thinking of, but that's not what the unseen, non-physical knowledge is based from. So the non-physical knowledge therefore creates the physical knowledge, and that's a part of what substance dualism is those two things being separate, which I think that they're together, that they interact together. I think they're just two sides of the same coin. And I think this all coexists into how magic works. So yes, I think magic is real, and I think that if you're also sitting in churches and stuff, and then you don't believe in that, and you don't believe that magic is real, then I don't really think you could be a Christian, because kind of being a Christian kind of hates that you have to believe in like some mythicism, because a guy kind of rose from the dead. So, and then he also says that witchcraft is real. They call it an abomination in the Bible. So there's no getting out of it. Like, magic is real. So you can't. I mean, I'm sure there's some religions that don't believe in it at all, but I think that everything points to there being some type of divine figure. Because I also saw a comedian once say that like atheist people would say that like when you die you just go back into nothing, and then so the comedian was like, oh, so you merge back with your creator because nothing created the universe, and then when they die, and when you die they say you just go back into nothingness. And then he said, so you're telling me you merge back with your creator? That's God. Is what he said. Anyway, so yeah. Just that's really all I got. Yeah, it was just some random thinking, and that's what I do on this channel anyway. So feel free to check out my link though to my nonprofit, because I'm just trying to help veterans, and I also have an autistic sister, and we tried something trying to also help with autism as well. So thank you. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and thank you for watching.